Hello, and thanks for tuning into the show that goes around the continent to bring you stories near and far. I'm Joke Rogers at Channels Television here in Lagos, and I'm joined by my colleague from the Voice of America in Washington.
Thanks, I'm Vincent McCory at the Voice of America. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Joke Rogers in Lagos brings you that story.
Scarcity and proliferation of unqualified teachers in public schools across northern Nigeria has been described as a setback to education in a region that's just recovering from an education system battered by insurgency. In an exclusive interview with Channels Television, some educationists explain that the problem began at the recruitment level, coupled with poor remuneration for teachers.
This is Abikume Primary School, located in Potiskum, local government area of Yola State. It has about 18,000 registered pupils and only 26 teachers. This will definitely make the learning process difficult. Although the state government has declared a state of emergency on education, built structures, as well as recruited a number of teachers, it seems the challenge is still far from over. Many schools in the state are still battling with scarce teachers and many underqualified teachers, especially in the rural areas. These educationists reveal the factors responsible.
Actually, it's really affecting. First of all, we have to start from the beginning, the recruitment process. What are the criteria and guidelines for recruitment, which has already failed? Because before you take somebody or appoint somebody for an appointment as a teacher, you must look at the qualification. What are the qualifications? What are the specialization? But this is lacking.
Government have to intervene, employ qualified teachers, motivate the existing teachers. Motivation is very, very vital in encouraging the existing teachers and attracting more teachers to come into the teaching profession.
Things may be on the verge of changing. A concerned organization is looking into encouraging at least 14,500 community volunteer teachers to bridge the gap across 3 local government areas of Bade, Damaturu and Potiskum to be trained on continuity learning in emergencies.
We are currently training 82 community volunteer teachers that we have recruited under this project that are across 11 schools and 11 communities. They have been trained on pedagogy of alternative learning, on MHPSS, on preventing sexual abuse and exploitation and classroom management. This is a part of our effort to ensure that the lack of manpower gap have been bridged to complement the government effort, while we ensure out-of-school children have access to education even in emergencies.
Yola State has recently set aside funds to revitalize the education sector. The government will need to, however, pay particular attention to the recruitment of more qualified teachers and rehabilitate structures destroyed by the insurgency to meet the high demand of its population.
Now let's speak to Mr. Maman Mohammed, the DG Press and Public Affairs to the Yola State Governor in Northeast Nigeria. Thank you for joining us today on Africa 54.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Right, so Yola State is one of the states that has been ravaged by the Boko Haram insurgency. How has this affected the education sector in your state?
Yeah, thank you very much once again. As you are aware, actually the Boko Haram insurgency has dealt ruthlessly with education in the base states, that's Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa. However, what is happening here in Yobe is that during the 2019 campaigns, when His Excellency Honorable Malabuni was going around, he saw things for himself. And as soon as he was elected, during his inaugural address, he made it very clear that he declared a state of emergency on the education sector. And of course, that brought in the first summit on education that was ever held in the state, and education experts, intellectuals, education administrators were all assembled. Virtually every stakeholder was represented at the summit. And of course, they came up with short and long-term suggestions as to revamp the education sector, to rejuvenate it, to bring it back to life. And of course, this is being adhered to religiously so as to see that education is rejuvenated, education is brought back to life in Yola State, and it's working very well.
So what's education and what's teaching without teaching staff? Now we understand there's been a proliferation of unqualified teachers across the north. What's the state government doing to ensure that only qualified teachers are employed at the state's public schools?
Yeah, your assessment is generalistic anyway, but what is happening in Yola State, which is a peculiar, the government is conscious of this general problem. And of course, when it's recruiting qualified and teachers that have the skill, the knowledge to impart knowledge. For instance, 315 qualified teachers with the requisite qualifications were employed for the mega and model schools. So also recently, about 2,670 graduates, HND holders, and SCE holders were recently employed.
Right. So let's talk a bit more about the state of emergency that you said earlier was declared on the education sector. I also understand that the governor began an appeal fund to revitalize the education sector in Yola State. So what kind of impact has this had so far?
Yes, the Yola Education Trust Fund was launched to generate revenue so as to complement government efforts in the revamping of the education sector. And of course, there were donations, and there is an independent committee that is now executing the recommendations of the education summit that I told you much earlier. Even the mobilization of girls for the girl child education, to promote girl child education, they've been so very visible in these areas and contributing or complementing government effort to see that, yes, education is collectively moved forward.
Right. I was just going to ask you about, girl child education and how, the state of emergency is taken into cognizance that, girl child education is very important. Could you explain more on this?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a realization of this that the state government took deliberate measures to establish 8 new girls' schools across the state. This is to promote girl child education. And it has also involved stakeholders like traditional rulers, religious and opinion leaders, and like I told you, the Yola Education Trust Fund, in the mobilization process of getting these girls off the street and registering into, or getting enrolled into the schools.
Just before I let you go, what about, security? We started with the rebuilding process post-insurgency. What kind of security is in place to ensure that these schools, are not vulnerable to attacks?
Yes, to the glory of God, today the security situation in Yola State has tremendously improved, and virtually all over the state is now accessible. His Excellency, the Executive Governor of Yola, is also making frantic efforts so as to be proactive in ensuring the security of students in all the schools.
So, Maman Mohammed, thank you so much for your time today on Africa 54.
Thanks so much for having me. It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. After the break, environmental activists in Nigeria join the global fight against climate emergencies affecting the country and the world. Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Environmental and climate activists across Nigeria are joining forces with others worldwide in the fight to combat climate change. Gibson Emeka has this story from Abuja, Nigeria, narrated by Salem Solomon.
We have less than 5 years to act. So it's actually a reminder, it's actually a call, it's actually a wake-up, it's actually a need for urgent action
Sakina Bello, a leading environmental activist, is doing her part to ensure that world temperatures don't rise above an average of 1.5 degrees Celsius. A 2018 report from the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change predicts that this could happen as early as 2030 and drastically change the global climate system. Bello is urging Nigerians to get involved in the fight to save their country and the world from climate extremes.
So it actually started from the community, from the grassroots, and from the home, and that's how the passion started. Community need to be informed about the effect of their attitude, and they should be called for attitudinal change, because if we don't change our attitude, then we're coming back to zero.
Nigeria has seen extreme weather events linked to climate change, including the flooding of Bello's hometown. According to the Nigeria National Emergency Agency, flooding in 2022 displaced around 2.5 million people, affected over 800,000 hectares of farmland, and caused an estimated $9.12 billion in economic losses. Joseph Ibrahim is the West African coordinator of Climate Clock, a project that sets up clocks that show how much time is left to prevent the global temperature from rising above 1.5 degrees Celsius, the scientific point of no return. He says climate change has caused food insecurity.
We are having increasing floods in our communities, and then we are having longer drought in the north. Sahara Desert is encroaching our land very fast, and so we are losing productive land to the desert.
Aliyu Yauri, an official from the Nigerian Ministry of Environment, says the country has and will continue to scale up efforts to combat the climate crisis.
Recently, the National Council on Climate Change has been established just to ensure that climate change issue is given a priority in national development programs in Nigeria.
Environmental advocate Michael David says the Nigerian government needs to go beyond policy and into implementation.
The implementation is where the issues are. And again, a lot of this happen only at the federal level. At the state, nothing is being done.
Effecting change takes money, and lack of financing has slowed national efforts, but Bello says she will keep trying, person by person, to stop rising temperatures. For Gibson Emeka, in Abuja, Nigeria, Salam Solomon, VOA News.
Well, elsewhere in northern Nigeria, Governor Hyacinth Ali of Benue State has asked the Joint Security Services to sustain its offensive operation against insurgency to support the gradual return of peace in the state. Governor Ali made the appeal while speaking to the graduates of the War College Course 9 at the Nigerian Air Force Base, Makurdi, where participants drawn from the Nigerian Air Force, Navy and the Army on air combat operations. The Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, assures the governor that the armed forces will partner with him to ensure peace and the restoration of Benue status as the food basket of the nation.
The governor of Benue State, in the company of the Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, who is representing the Minister of Defense, Mr. Mohammed Badaru, at the graduation ceremony of members of Course 9 of the Air War College, Makurdi, the capital of Benue State. One after the other, officers who have distinguished themselves during the training are recognized.
Satisfactorily to many the award.
The training involved middle-level officers drawn from the Nigerian Air Force, Navy, and the Army as part of efforts to keep officers abreast of the highest operation strategies that will help them adequately mount 12 new aircraft platforms ready for delivery by the Air Force.
To boost our training, air power, employment, and projection, Nigerian Air Force will be receiving additional platforms before the end of the year. These include 2 Augusta 109 Trekker multi-role helicopters, 2 Beechcraft King Air 360 aircraft, 2 Diamond 62 surveillance aircraft, and 6 TK-129 attack helicopters.
One issue that is troubling the mind of their host is how to sustain peace that the state is presently enjoying.
We couldn't have the peace that we wished for, prayed for, and desired. But each time we feel your presence, we understand what you do, and you keep enabling us to sleep with 2 eyes closed. Much peace is returned to the state since May 29th this year, and it is our prayer that it continues this way.
However, the Chief of Defense Staff is pledging to work with the state government to make that a reality.
Being the challenges we have on ground, Benue with the peculiarities of the terrain, we have addressed that, and then we're going to ensure that the security challenges are being tackled effectively. And like His Excellency just mentioned, the military cannot do it alone. Nobody can do it alone without the support of the populace.
15 officers participated in the training, including a Cameroonian officer, 2 officers from the Nigerian Army, and 2 naval officers.
For the deaf-blind person, the combination of vision and hearing loss can make for a confined and isolating existence. A startup in Boston is developing a robot to expand communication and access to information. VOA's Tina Treen has more.
Samantha Johnson knows tactile sign language, a version of sign language used by some in the deaf-blind community.
Deaf-blind people communicate through tactile signing, also known as hand-over-hand signing. So the deaf-blind person holds onto the back of the hand of the signer and receives the signs into their palm directly.
When the pandemic struck, Johnson wondered what it meant for those who rely on the touch-based method of communication.
Because interpreting services stopped, social distancing was in place, the millions of deaf-blind Americans didn't have access to communication.
She and her team of engineers at Tatum Robotics came up with the Tatum T1, a robotic hand that can sign letters of the American Sign Language alphabet.
Our goal is to develop the first assistive communication tool for the deaf-blind community that prioritizes tactile sign. It's currently made with all flexible components, which kind of serves 2 purposes. Not only does it really mimic a human hand, so it's really easy for the deaf-blind person to acclimate to its signing, but it's also really safe.
Johnson says the T1 will connect to the cloud to translate any text-based content.
So that could be emails, websites, ebooks, and what it does is it will take that content, it will translate it out of English and into ASL, and then output it for the deaf-blind user.
Jamie Lard is completely deaf and has very little vision. She relies on tactile signing and an interpreter to communicate. In the absence of an interpreter, the T1 can serve as a stand-in and translate words typed into a connected laptop.
It said, "Hi, my name is Tina."
It's still in development, but Johnson hopes the device will ultimately provide greater independence and connection.
The deaf-blind person's at home, they're very isolated. They don't have access to entertainment or the community the way that we take advantage of.
Technology that can truly be a helping hand. Tina Trin, VOA News, Boston.
The Lagos State government has asked patients in hospitals to take part in their recovery process while being treated. The board chairman of the Lagos State Health Facilities Monitoring and Accreditation Agency, Dr. Yemisi Solanke-Koya, says HEFAMA will continue to carry out its role by ensuring patient safety in healthcare facilities in Lagos State and seeks collaboration of everyone in achieving the goal. Dr. Solanke-Koya was speaking at the 2023 World Patient Safety Day in Bagada.
The General Hospital Bagada is the venue for the commemoration of the 2023 World Patient Safety Day. The Lagos State Health Facilities Monitoring and Accreditation Agency is using the opportunity to visit the maternity ward and other patients who are in for treatment in the hospital. The state government reaffirms its commitment to patient safety, irrespective of their social status.
And this year we do so with a profound theme, engaging patients for patient safety. It emphasizes the crucial role patients play in their own health care journey and the pivotal role we as healthcare professionals play in fostering their active engagement.
Patient safety goes beyond physical protection and extends to medication and aiding quick recovery.
Patients must be engaged through the totality of the healthcare terrain. Thus, it is a win-win situation for the field of medicine if patients comply and understand why. For this will translate into better outcomes of health indices for Lagos State and indeed the country.
Nevertheless, health workers and patients alike are also encouraged not to engage in unsafe care.
Every year, there is a large number of patients that are harmed or that die because of unsafe health care. And it creates a large burden of death and disability worldwide, especially in low and middle income countries. And an estimated 1 in 10 patients have adverse effects.
Others feel more enlightenment is needed for the people, especially when it comes to patient safety.
The objective of this celebration is to create awareness and engagement, enhance global understanding and work towards global solidarity and action by all stakeholders to enhance patient safety and reduce patients' harm.
A call to action for government and patients, particularly for the people to speak up about their own health journey. Above all, they're encouraged to believe in the Lagos State healthcare system, which has a mandate to ensure that no one is harmed while receiving health care.
Kenyan video gamers are joining forces to advocate for bringing to Africa more world-class gaming servers that provide greater stability and control. Apart from South Africa, many African countries lack servers, placing players at a disadvantage and discouraging many from joining esports. Mohamed Yusuf has more from Nairobi.
Brian Dianga, an esports enthusiast in Nairobi, Kenya, developed a love for gaming at an early age. He's among professional gamers in Africa, pushing for the continent to have access to the same level of technology available to other players around the world.
I feel anyone can be in it, and we are in it actively. And I can say I started playing video games casually, and then moving forward, we translated from just playing for fun to actually playing to earn.
According to a study conducted by game analytics company Newzo, there are 186 million gamers in sub-Saharan Africa. Despite the increasing number of the gamers in recent years, the continent has faced challenges in keeping pace with the growth in the competitive sector. Experts say economic inequality, weak internet connections, and a lack of high-performing gaming servers are hindering esports growth in Africa. During competitions, African gamers rely on South African servers, which host only a few games out of the hundreds available in the gaming industry.
Millisecond is the metric that's used now to measure the amount of time it will take from one device to reach the server of that particular game to that region and back. So the millisecond, as the distance increases, becomes much, much larger. And the more larger it is, the more difficult it is to actually play online.
In Kenya, a community of video gamers is working to unlock full potential of the gaming industry in Africa. In Nairobi, gamers play a combat esports game that does not have a server host in Africa. The winner of the event will qualify to participate in a tournament in Romania and play online with gamers from the Americas, Asia and Europe. It is a rare opportunity for most African gamers because of the continent's unreliable internet connections and limited gaming servers.
Outside of the continent, it's not easy to get a good connection with them, so the game is not going to be playable because of we're outside the continent. So now the only option we have left is now for us to travel to them or them to come to us, and then we can play. And that's why I'm really looking forward to this trip, so I can get to meet these players and play with them.
Video gamers say they're stepping away from their computers to lobby game publishers to provide servers and to encourage internet providers to help build esports infrastructure and grow the billion-dollar industry. Mohamed Yusuf for VA News, Nairobi.
Well, and that's our show for today. You can find all the continent's top news and world news online at voaafrica.com. Check it out. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Channels Television has our last word.
Well, we look forward to bringing you another show next week. Do remember that channelstv.com is your source for news and other programming. I'm Joker Rogers. Thanks for watching and goodbye.